Welcome to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, and Rule Breakers. I'm your host, Cindy Glanzrock. On today's episode, we are honored to have Jane Friedman, who defines what it means to be a publishing trailblazer, innovator, and rule breaker. We discuss Jane's storied career from her early days at Alfred Knopf to becoming the president of the first Random House audiobooks and ultimately leading HarperCollins Worldwide as a CEO. Discover the story behind her creative marketing innovation, the author tours, working with literary icons such as Toni, Morrison, and Julia Childs. Explore an ever-changing and evolving landscape of the publishing industry with insights into the past, present, and future.
How do people learn? How do people socialize? How do people get on if they don't read? I don't know how they do. I think that reading is a singularly important thing for the greater good and for the future of civilization.
Jane describes her close relationships with celebrity writers such as Lauren Bacall and the rise of audio and digital formats, and later her co-founding Open Road Integrated Media, which she successfully sold. She provides us a unique seasoned view with anecdotes, reflections, and a glimpse into the changing dynamics of publishing. A must-listen for book enthusiasts, aspiring authors, or anyone who shares our curiosity about the transformative power of knowledge through literature. Please join us with Jane Friedman on this evolving journey as we explore the intersection of the publishing business, the creatives, and the bottom line. Thank you. I'm excited that we have the pleasure and honor to speak with Jane Friedman, who is truly a trailblazer, a rule breaker, an innovator, and a creative source of making things happen. She's doing that now, and she'll share that with us today. She co-founded something that I thought was extremely exciting called Open Road Integrated Media, and she'll tell us a little bit about that. She did the author tours. She'll tell us a lot about that because there were some fabulous artists, including Toni Morrison, which I can't wait to hear about. You going with Toni to when she received the Nobel laureate. And of course, she founded and became the president of one of the most important publishing companies in New York, which now there's lots of news about HarperCollins in the news today, which you can share a little bit about. I hear she was quoted even in the New York Times this past week. This was HarperCollins Worldwide, by the way, and she was the president and CEO from 1997 to 2008. So she was quite ahead of her time, and she had some great men that supported her along the way. Please do share a little bit about yourself, your family, your upbringing, your career with us, just to get things rolling. Jane Friedman, welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. It's awfully nice to be here today talking with you and talking about my past, the present, and the future. I started out in publishing as a publicist way back when, 50 years ago or so, but always knew that what I wanted to be, that I wanted to run the company, whatever that company was. And I started out at Alfred Knopf Publishers, which was the jewel in the crown of Random House. And I started, as I say, as first a dictaphone typist, as a temp, and then as a publicity assistant, publicity associate, promotion director, and on and on and on and on till...
So you had an actual career path.
I had a career path, and I had a very definite career path. And I followed it. One of the main parts of that career path was I am credited with inventing the author tour with Julia Childs, whom many of your listeners and viewers, I think, will remember as the great French chef. And I just one day thought, why not take this woman on the road? Why not go to local television and radio stations? Why not do book signings? And that's what I did. And it started with Julia. And of course, it then went on to become a stalwart of the publishing industry. Along the way.
That's very exciting. We all love Julia, and I followed her, and so I must have followed you indirectly.
Yes, you were following the footsteps that I laid out for her and for her very loyal husband who went along with her. But along the way at Random House, at Knopf and Random, I had some real opportunities. In 1985, I went to the then president of Random House, Inc., Bob Bernstein and said, I'd like to start something. I'd like to start an audiobooks division imprint at Random House. And he said, what are audiobooks? I said, those are the things that one listens to. You know, Bob, you were probably read to by your mother when you were a little boy. Well, now you'd have an actress or an actor reading to you.
Exactly.
And he looked me in the eye and he said, you know, it sounds ridiculous to me. And I looked him back in his eye and I said, it's going to be $1 billion business. And he said, okay, young lady. I was then still quite a young woman. He said, if you can continue doing what you're doing at Knopf and start this at the same time, I'll give you permission to do it.
So that's prior to Kindle.
Oh, much prior to Kindle.
You were really quite the innovator in this case.
Yes, I was. And just to end this story, unfortunately, he's passed away. But about 6 months before he passed away, I bumped into him at a screening. And we were talking. He said, I owe you an apology. I said, you do what? He said, you remember when you were that cute 20-somethings little girl and you said you wanted to start an audiobooks division? And I said, don't be ridiculous. And you said it's going to be $1 billion business. Well, you were right and I was wrong. And I thought that was very big of him to say that. And it pleased me to no end.
Well, the premise of, I know, a series that you're going to share with us a little bit later is the story of evolution, the evolution of publishing, editing, the importance of books. What you did was not just ahead of your time, but you are now trying to preserve that by having these series and talks and events, which, again, I'd love you to share with us later. But let's continue down this path of what made you love what you do and continue to do it. And please share with that, because it's been a long career. HarperCollins was next.
HarperCollins was next. After 29 years at Random House, HarperCollins was next. Well, I have always felt that the book is a singularly important object. We were never allowed to call it a book content at Knopf. We thought that was that just didn't sound right. But we had all these wonderful books, all these books from way back when, all these books that we were publishing at the moment, and books that we had under contract for the future. How do people learn? How do people socialize? How do people get on if they don't read? I don't know how they do. I think that reading is a singularly important thing for the greater good and for the future of civilization.
I think that books are, again, also for many, they don't carry books anymore. People don't bring them on a plane. They don't take them as much to a beach. They don't have them.
Well, you're talking about physical books, Cindy, and now there is this opportunity not only to take earphones and listen to a book,
right,
but to take a Kindle or your iPhone and read a book. So people are reading, and they are reading a lot. They are just reading differently than the way I grew up. When I grew up, a book was a print book. It was in hardcover first, then it was in paperback, and that was it. Well, now we still have the hardcover, we have the paperback, but we also have the ebook and the audiobook. We're giving the reader the choice.
As long as we give the reader the choice and we don't ban books.
Well, that's a whole other subject.
Yes, it is. It's interesting. I was reading about Gavin Newsoms passing this new law in September in San Francisco, insisting that there's no banning of books in schools. I was reading recently about an adaptation of the Diary of Anne Frank and how some of the schools have one particular school fired a teacher for sharing that book in school. It's the importance of books are still just as relevant as they always were. I'm sure you would agree.
And even more so, yes.
Why even more so, would you say?
Well, because I think there are many writers who write futuristically, and they hit on something that they may have invented, but then it comes to pass. I mean, 10 years ago, would anybody know about 10 years ago? 5 years ago, would anybody know about artificial intelligence and what that might do? And I don't want to go into it because I don't get it. And I don't think it's necessarily good. I only want to talk good about the power of reading something new.
Well, speaking of the power of reading something new, I mean, when I say it concerns me with, again, the majority of the book bans coming places from like Florida, for example, 40% of the book bans. We're up 30% according to Penn in terms of book bans from last year to this year. Without books and without the freedom of sharing of information, we're going to become a society that's very much about not an open road, a closed road, and closed-minded people. And what concerns me, I don't know if it concerns you, but are these people that are only see things one way? And
well, it's very sad, and I'm not even as concerned with the older generation. What I'm concerned about with the idea of banning books is that the younger generation, who are being formed and who should be informed, are the people that I'm concerned about if we are going to be banning books in schools and libraries. Well, I don't have an answer. I think it's awful. But
that's why these young new authors or poets like Amanda Gorman, just recently I mentioned to you, spoke at an event I was at about her children's books, and it very much about the illustrations and the diversity of people and liking and being open to who you want to be in life and what you want to be in life. And I know she was very much touched by and encouraged by, and I would say driven by someone by the name of Toni Morrison. And I know you knew her personally. And tell us a little bit about your involvement with Toni and the importance of her receiving a Pulitzer Prize and a Nobel Laureate Prize.
Toni Morrison, I knew for years and years. Toni Morrison was an editor at Random House before she became a writer. She was actually writing part-time, and she wrote a book called The Bluest Eye when she was still an editor. And as she started to grow in popularity and as other books began to be published, she realized she couldn't be an editor anymore, and she became an author, and she was a Knopf author, and I was particularly close to her. I worked with her on many of her books. African-American, single mother of two boys, working, doing whatever she could to make a good life for herself, and she really did, and she was rewarded with many accolades and many, many prizes. But I think that to win a Pulitzer, number one, is great. But to win the Nobel Prize for Literature is truly extraordinary. It's for the whole body of work. The Pulitzer was for one book. And I actually was fortunate enough to escort her to get that Nobel Prize.
Where was that?
You know, I knew you were just going to ask me that. It's Stockholm. But it may be Oslo. This is something you have to check.
Okay, well, I think yes, it is Stockholm, from what I understand. So that must have been what a treat. You, this bright-eyed blonde from New York, and Toni Morrison, who I think was from Ohio, if I recall correctly.
Originally, that's right. And Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates, was with us. I'm trying to think of some of the other people who were with us, but it was an amazing experience. I think something I will remember for a lifetime. And the best part of it was that it was being given to this African-American fiction writer who just deserved it very much.
Well, she's a beautiful writer, I know. Was it Beloved that was the one that I think received the Pulitzer Prize?
Well, the Pulitzer was, I believe, was Beloved, but the Nobel is for the body of work.
Body of work, I see. Well, speaking of, interesting, I don't know who published the Satanic Verses, but I was reading just about how certain books are banned again, whether it's about religion or politics, or in the case with the Diary of Anne Frank, we're not allowed to be shared in schools. What is your position on when you look for a writer or an author? Are you looking for some subject matter or an author that for everyone, so these issues don't arise when you're with a publishing company? How do you choose to promote and to market and to go on an audio book tour with?
Well, first of all, I should tell you Satanic Verses was published by Viking Publishers, so that's just for the record. I have never been an editor, so I have never been out there looking for new material.
Right.
More comes to the editor than the editor goes out looking for. So I think that an editor might have a subject in mind and might somehow connect to authors of the books of the kind of books that that author has in mind. But I think that it's not as cut and dry as, let's go out and find books on, sure, let's go out and find books on cooking. That is done. But in terms of literature and serious nonfiction, I think more the content comes in than that the editor goes out looking for it.
Well, you were the front face. So, whether you're with was John Grisham one of the people that you also?
No. Okay. No.
So I'm trying to remember some of the Le Carré was.
John Le Carré, yes.
That's what I'm thinking of. When you have someone who has a personality, I know I was recently talking to the owner of the bookstore Caneo's in Sag Harbor about John Steinbeck. So some people are easier to work with on tour and market and get out there and get their books because they have personalities that you can work with, like artists that I work with when I'm working in the art field. So is that not true of the publishing world, that they look for people that they can also promote because they, as an author, or are there any authors that were particularly fun to work with and really easygoing, and then others that were more difficult and made your job harder?
I think that like any other field, there are authors or artists who are easy to work with, and then there are those that are not. Yes, when a book is being looked at, one hopes that the author is marketable, that the book subject is marketable, and that the author is promotable. Not every author is. Not every author wants to do it. Not every author has the right personality. Right. Years ago, I published Lauren Bacall, the great actress.
Yes, and how was she to work with?
And she was very, very difficult about doing promotion. Mm-hmm. And we would have these giant book signings, and I would stand. In fact, we had to close Fifth Avenue. There was a Doubleday bookstore on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street. Yeah. We had to close Fifth Avenue. There were so many people online to get a copy of her book. And she was signing them by rote. And I whispered in her ear at one point, her name was Betty, actually. I whispered in her ear, Betty, look up and say thank you. This person has just plugged down X amount of dollars. That's the least you can do.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I kind of woke her up to that, and she was, and then she was okay. But talk about electronic media, and she was fine. That was more her milieu. So she had no problem going on television shows and doing radio, and she was perfect, and the book became a big bestseller, and we were very happy. So there are authors that can be trained also on media, and I believe that there are still people who are doing that. But it's all of a piece. You have to first get the book itself, and then see how that author will fit in and fit into the scheme of things, and market the book down the road.
Well, for me, it's so interesting because all of these companies that you've worked with have become absorbed and bought, and I think some even maybe have disappeared. I know publishing it's such a moving industry. When you see what's happened, I think we spoke the other day about Bertelsmann bought, was it Random House, or they merged, and then we were talking about all these companies. How do people such as yourself, you stay in touch with a lot of your friends from way back when, but how have they evolved? Like, you're evolving by doing these talks and tours and events. How are people in the publishing world evolving and staying, keeping their jobs or finding another place to work?
Publishing is an industry right now that is in flux. There is no doubt about it. And just to fact straight, Bertelsmann bought Random House many, many, many years ago. Yes. Random House bought Knopf many, many, many years ago. Right now, there's stuff going on. Yes. And Random House tried to buy Simon & Schuster, and it failed in the courts. So Simon & Schuster has just been bought by a bunch of venture people. I don't understand that, but okay, fine. The thing is that we're in a cycle. We're at a point in the circle of life, of publishing life, where there are going to be fewer and fewer mainstream publishers, but there are going to be more and more of inventive small presses that will publish books the same way as the larger publishers do, meaning produce them in all different formats and get them distributed all around. But they may have some special interests. There are some publishing companies out that are all digital, and maybe they'll do a print version, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be all digital. It's an evolving industry, and I don't know what it's going to evolve into. It is a business, whereas years ago, publishing was not thought of as a business. It was thought of as a wonderful thing, and if you made money, fine, and if you didn't make money, that's fine too. No more. It is now a real business, which I applaud. I have always been on the side of good publishing is good business. That has always been my phrase. Yeah. But that hasn't been the phrase of everybody's.
So though these small publishers you were speaking about the other day, there's 300, 400, 500. There's so many of them out there. And self-publishing, so many people self-publish today. So, and right. You said everything is, but you also spoke about everything is cyclical. And so if we're coming back around, where are we coming back around from? It seems like it's changed.
Well, we're not there yet. We're just at the beginning of the circle, which is, as I just said, fewer large publishing houses, many small houses, and also self-publishing. And we're going to see where that all evolves to.
Okay. So it's a new path, and we haven't, like you said, we're turning at some corner. But the question to you is, with podcasting, for example, people sometimes, this is sort of taken the place of, I think, sometimes reading or listening, audiobooks. Podcasting has taken a chunk of time.
I don't agree, because listening to an audiobook, you're listening to the words of the author, read by the author or read by an actor. And by the way, my opinion is that if an author is not a regular reader of his or her books, then you should go with an actress or an actor, because it just flows better. But a podcast is more of a conversation. It's more of an interview. I don't see it as replacing the actual reading of a book.
Well, we only have so much time in a day, even though we squeeze a heck of a lot in. So sometimes you have to choose between, am I going to spend 45 minutes on a podcast, or am I going to start listening to a book? So you do have to choose.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, this past week with the whole rise of Lachlan and at HarperCollins and the Wall Street Journal, I think it was Jeff Trachtenberg at the Wall Street Journal who wrote about the rise.
Yes.
You were quoted or spoken to. I heard through the grapevine Lachlan knew nothing about publishing, so to speak. And that was not his background, not to say he can't handle it. But what are your feelings about people running a company that didn't have any background in this world?
He was given HarperCollins as part of his portfolio, and he was eager. And I think that in the years that we worked together, he learned a lot. I think that I was actually quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying that, he didn't get into the weeds, but he liked the fact that the company was doing well, and the company was doing very well, which I was very proud of. So we had a perfectly fine relationship. And I think that by the time I left, he knew more about publishing than I think he ever thought he would have, and his interest is still there. I have not heard that HarperCollins is on the block for sale from news, but one never knows. One never knows.
But you've seen quite a bit, having been hired by Rupert Murdoch.
Right.
And having then Lachlan as your boss. I think you said he was in his mid to late 20s at the time. When
he was about 27, right?
So, and that was when that was, I guess, all part of News Corp back then, and Fox, and it was all one big conglomerate.
Yes.
Okay. So it's very interesting for me to see how, people choose their news. I don't know if they choose their books based on what publisher publishes it. I don't believe so.
They don't, Cindy. They absolutely don't. I mean, the only time there have been some identifying areas. Knopf was known for cookbooks, yes, and you'd look for Knopf cookbooks. But for the most part, the publisher is irrelevant to the reader, so that our connection with Fox, there was no connection to the outside world.
Well, I know we don't like the expression that was used, even though I think being a veteran is probably today considered almost an honorable honor. So
yes, I was a publishing veteran. Yes,
publishing, but the spin on veteran is really about how we want to go to someone like you to see how are people going to receive material that are going to take them away from their crazy lives of media, of these things, these cell phones and computers. So how are we going to, is digital and AI or audiobooks a way to remove yourself from all the noise that we have in our life and calm us down and give us some sort of sense of quiet and equilibrium? I mean, where do you see this going in terms of health and wellness? Because a good book was a way to sort of relax, reading a good book.
I think it's an interesting question. I think that the answer lies in what kind of books you're reading. With all of the political books coming out now, I don't think that's going to ease anybody or help to put them to sleep quietly, maybe put to sleep rather than having a nightmare. The notion of the book being instructive, yes. The notion of the book being interesting, yes. I think that the notion of reading a nice novel under a palm tree on an island somewhere, I think that's probably great, but I think that's being done less and less. So I think that the book now is more about information, even fiction, information. And I think people want to be informed about lots of different things.
That's why the absurdity of any sign of censorship. I'm sure you don't.
Yes.
You don't get how that can be in this
right.
time, and we are in some ways going backwards instead of being more forthright. I know Plato. When I studied Plato, wiped out his competition, so there's only Plato at the time. There was a famous Chinese writer who also wiped out Confucius's, writing.
Oh, yes?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, we've always had this historically in history is like trying to push down, push away, intimidate. But that concerns me.
One thing that I didn't say, and I think, and I'll take a little bit of the concern away from you, is that there are specific genre that where people lose themselves in the genre. So mystery, for example, can be really something that can be informative, interesting, exciting, but also take the reader to another place, and that can be very appealing. So there are ways to find books that do make you feel okay about yourself and the world you're living in, maybe by even looking at where the protagonist is in a certain mystery novel, what that protagonist is doing compared to what you're doing, which is reading about him or her and going with him or her.
Well, even though they were scary, I always loved Agatha Christie. I don't know if you read any of...
I have a lot of it. Yes, of course.
And I don't know who published her, but I know that was a way to escape. And whether it was a book to read or to listen to, or a movie that it was adapted into a movie. I mean, I think that was... Are we going to have those types of books anymore where they're serious?
Yes. Yes, we are. We are, not to worry.
Okay.
Agatha Christie, I believe, was English. I believe that those rights came to America.
It's interesting for me to read that Harry Potter was even banned in some schools or in some states. And, I think about the importance, again, of a woman author, again, someone who is so important, historically speaking, in terms of a publisher. She wasn't obviously self-published, but she was very much a part of the whole experience.
Absolutely.
And I thought that would be more the way of publishing, of taking an important author that becomes very involved in the actual publishing and is very out front and in terms of the marketing, and also expanding it into receiving other platforms, such as it turning into a movie.
But remember that when Scholastic first took on Harry Potter, they had no idea where that was going to go. I mean, that was just a whole brilliant publishing enterprise. I can't tell you why that's banned. I haven't read why that's banned. I don't care to read why it's banned. I just find it outrageous that it's banned.
Well, it's a mysticism.
Yeah. Not reality.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're speaking about something that it's hocus pocus, and for a lot of people, hocus pocus, that's frightening. Not knowing where things are going.
Right.
I mean, think about Mein Kampf. I don't know who published it, but it was read by many, right?
By many.
Read by many.
Yes.
So, and then on the other hand, like I said earlier, a book like The Diary of Anne Frank, they want to ban from teaching it in a school. So, like, these are very opposing, sides, and I would think parents want their children to be exposed. I mean, exposure is so important.
Well, not all parents are open-minded, Cindy.
Right.
I think that there's certain parents who are probably figuring, fine, the school decided to ban this. There's a reason. We'll just let it be. But I think that this is going to grow into a very, very big subject because it's bizarre. And the people who are, I don't know the people who are banning the books nationwide, but I certainly don't think I'd want to be their friend.
Well, or live in states that are so conservative about what literatures and what can be taught in schools. I keep bringing up Florida and Texas because they are, primarily the ones that these are issues, very and more conservative. So unfortunately, literature and politics do come into play, and that's why I was asking you about your position. Not that you wanted to. I would ask you about your position in terms of mentoring. Mentoring is so important in terms of the future, young people's future. And I know Bob Gottlieb was such a special person in your life, as was Sunny Mehta.
The two men in my life that were
How did they help you? How did they pick you up and push you forward?
Well, Bob Gottlieb, when I went to work for him, I was basically 21 years old, and he basically let me just move along the path that I wanted to move on, which was on the business side. It was not on the editorial side. It was basically publicity, advertising, marketing, connection to the sales department, very involved with the authors. And Bob had me in on, author meetings all the time with new authors who wanted to come to Knopf.
And just so people know, what was Bob Gottlieb's title?
He may not have ever had a title. I'm sure he was called publisher of Knopf. I'm sure he was called president of Knopf.
Okay.
Titles meant absolutely nothing to him. He ran the company.
How interesting.
And that's it. Knopf was very different in terms of having titles. People just kept rising and kept picking up titles along the way. But he ran the whole company, and he was just a genius. I mean, that's what he was.
And Sunny?
Yes, Bob left to go to run the New Yorker, which was also owned by Condé Nast. We were owned by Condé Nast. Condé Nast had sold the company to Bertelsmann, but we were involved with Condé Nast. And Bob went off. Cy Newhouse plucked him and said, "Now come run the New Yorker. You've done a great job at Knopf." And it was a heartache for all of us. No one ever thought he would leave us. He actually never did. His memorial was yesterday, and all the people who spoke talked about the fact that Bob never let anybody go. Once you were in Bob's clutches, you were there, and you were very happy to be there.
That sounds like a big compliment.
He was a wonderful, wonderful man and a brilliant, brilliant publisher. And a publisher who had a sense of humor. We had all this great literature, and then he decided to publish a book called Miss Piggy's Guide to Life. I mean, we always surprised the industry with what we did. Sunny Mehta came in as this very distinguished publisher from Britain, but had basically been publishing in paperback and needed to understand the publishing of the hardback, why the hardback, where. And I became Sunny's really number two. And I was never given the title of publisher because the title was not used, but I was everything else.
I'm curious, you said the backlists were very important to you, building, that was like an area, a niche market for you. Can you describe that a little bit to the people listening, what that is and how you use that to get ahead?
Sure. The first year of publication of a book is called front list. And from the beginning of the second year, the book goes into backlist. So backlist is from year 2 all the way back when copyright was invented. Knopf had Vintage, which was a very strong backlist publishing company, and they did a lot of marketing of the backlist along with the Knopf frontlist. So if a frontlist author had a book come out, we marketed the frontlist author and the whole backlist. The backlist always was at least 40% of the profits of a publishing industry, between 40 and 60%. The frontlist is where you took the risk. The backlist was that the book survived the first year and people still wanted to buy it. And I was called kind of the queen of the backlist because I loved the idea of going deep back all the way with authors.
So someone like John Updike that you represented, would he there be?
Yes.
That would be an example of someone that would have front and then back.
Huge backlist. Yes.
And then
in those days, we would market basically the paperback of the backlist. Today, the backlist is very much all available electronically. And that was also part of my doing with the founding of Open Road.
So Open Road Integrated Media was something you founded. When was that? What year?
1997.
Wow. And then it got sold, you said, to another venture, you and your...
In 2008. But it was a strictly digital publishing company. It was all backlist.
Really?
Because the backlist was available to us. The words digital didn't appear in contracts until 1994. So there were a lot of years with a lot of books that we could publish.
So the content, we always say, well, some people say content is king. I mean, I know that that's something that we were discussing the other day, the importance of good content. There's nothing worse when I start to read a book and I'm the first chapter and second chapter and I'm still not into it.
Then you have to put it down and go to another one.
Exactly. That's good advice. But I want to speak to you about something. It was moving. I went to see the opera Dead Man Walking this week. It was the opening night, and I was surprised to hear that you actually were there at the very beginnings when the author, the nun,
Sister Helen Prejean,
who wrote the book 40 years ago. And then it became, of course, a movie with Sigourney Weaver and Sean Penn, and it was an opera starting in San Francisco about 22 years ago. And then we had opening night at the Met. So what was that like? I mean, can you share with us working with Sister Prejean?
Well, I didn't work directly with her. I was the head of the company, and her editor, a very lovely woman called Luann Walther, has been connected to her from those 40 years ago to today. The thing that's so interesting is that this has come back, and I'm going to see it, I think, on October 8th. Singularly important book. And you said that you did go to see it?
Yes, on opening night. This is this week.
And what did you think?
I thought it was extraordinarily relevant. I mean, of course, criminal justice is a very important subject right now with what's gone on even this week in Philadelphia. It's not capital punishment that we're talking about, but the whole subject of capital punishment and how we've gone from electric chair to injections, from 80% approval ratings down to 50-something% approval ratings. And just the whole, the audience was at the edge of their seats watching this. They actually showed very close up. I don't want to give it away, of course.
Yeah, no, don't. Right. You're
So it
right.
was very close up. It moved you. It was very upsetting. And just the idea of the truth will set you free, which was really the concept here from, of course,
Yes.
Helen, the nun who was there for the whole storyline throughout, and she was Joan DiDonato, the woman who sang this. The mezzo soprano was extremely moving, wonderful too, but she did not originally want to take the part because of the subject, from what I understand and was told. And I think it was a difficult subject for any of them to let.
Well, I hope that Vintage has done a lot with the book. Now, this is where Backlist comes to play.
Yes.
If I were running Vintage right now, I would be promoting this book very, very heavily, both in store and online. I don't know what's going on. Just haven't looked. I haven't seen, but I will assume that that they will be doing their work. I should just say a sidebar is that I am working on the building of a museum at Sing Sing. So I am a museum that will actually deal with the criminal justice system as it was in the past, as it is in the present, and how it will be in the future.
So in a museum, who will be going to that museum?
The public.
Okay, so it'll be open to the public at Sing Sing.
It will be on the grounds of Sing Sing. Yes, that's right, in Ossining, New York. And we're working very hard to get this ready, to have the museum ready by 2025, which will be the 200th anniversary of the prison. And it's fascinating to see what was there, what went on. You know, the electric chair was there. The electric chair is still there and one can see it, but not sample it, fortunately. But so I'm very interested to see my reaction to Dead Man Walking and how this all fits into my life right now. It just shows how life things intersect somehow. I mean, I hadn't thought about Dead Man Walking in 40 years.
A long time.
And now here we go. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that the importance of reading to me, reading to children, reading to the elderly. I'm myself involved with some organizations, charitable organizations, where I literally read to youngsters that need help, have literacy issues, and we have literacy issues in our schools. And I think it's so important to understand the importance of, if you cannot read, I mean, the importance of these. There was a wonderful Jane Fonda movie. Do you remember that movie where she taught the character in the movie, who's another really very famous actor, how to read? He couldn't read. He could do everything well, but he never was taught how to read. And we have a lot of issues with literacy in America. So the importance of getting people such as yourself in the publishing world to really maybe look at that more closely and seeing how we can get kids back into reading, or because if they're listening to books, they're not learning how to read, of course.
But they're getting something from listening also. I mean, you can't deny the value of hearing the words of the author spoken to you. But I agree that reading a physical book is an experience and should be experienced by the young.
What is your favorite book?
No.
Oh, come on. You can give us one.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay, fair enough. And the reason why you loved it?
I just thought it was completely brilliant. And ultimately, when I took over at HarperCollins, it had been published there. So I got to spend time with the author, and I just think it was brilliant.
Well, I have to say, I would agree with you. That was one of my favorites, too. We were talking to Alice Aycock, and she was reeling off all the books that her father bought for her and made her read, which she said it was sometimes as much as 50 books a year that she read, and how important that was in her life. So she was it was very concerning to her about censorship and the importance of reading. So that's why I asked you.
Which it is to most sophisticated and educated and smart people. But unfortunately, we live in a world where things are not perfect.
That is for sure. And we will continue to join. I mean, I know book clubs are supposedly on the upswing. I don't know if you've read about that.
I think that, yes, I think the book club is an interesting concept. I do not belong to one. I was trying to join one, and it just didn't work. But I would like to. I will probably join one this year just to see how it actually operates. But I know people who have found their book clubs to be very significant in their lives.
Is there anything you could share with us in terms of what you're doing that's new and innovative right now? I know there are some upcoming events that you've produced, shared with Victoria Wilson, is it?
Yes.
Your colleague and friend, and that you started off in the industry many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we feel like giving back, I know it sounds trite, but giving back is good. And both Victoria and I have had pretty extraordinary careers, but only by working very hard to get to where we wanted to get to. So we are doing a conversation. A lot of it has to do with publishing, but some of it just has to do really with self-worth and trying to help young women in particular. And there are two young women in particular and women in their 50s who are entering a second career, but to help them along the way, to tell them that it can be done, and you can pick what you want to be, and you can become what you want to be if you just don't stop pushing, and if you just are absolutely diligent about your path and what you're going to follow.
And this is the story of, used to say also, the evolution of both of your careers. So that's how you sort of share it, but it's also about how to help others in the future moving forward.
Exactly. I mean, we have done a lot in our careers, and we want to share that because we think that, number one, it's interesting, and it also helps the audience to understand how we kept going because there were setbacks, etc. But so it's learning a little bit from what our career has given us, but it also is how to break through the glass ceiling that has been spoken about for many, many years. And there's now a glass cliff. I mean, there are different milestones where you can stumble, and we are going to show people how they don't have to stumble.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm really appreciative of your time today, and I don't plan on stumbling as long as I know you, because your guidance, and I think just to show your wealth of experience and sticking in it and not giving up and still working very hard at your newest, I should say, venture with your friend. And it's nice that you have these friends that you've kept for 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
You've got it. You've got that number. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and happy and healthy.
Cindy, very nice spending time with you.
Please subscribe to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, Rule Breakers, wherever you listen to podcasts, including but not limited to Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. If you prefer to watch, you can visit us on YouTube.